What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I missed y'all, and today is an exciting day, man, because we're finally going to start on the paint body work for the turbo diesel OBS single cab short bed. For those of you who follow, you know that we're trying to build this truck for under $5,000. We already took care of the exhaust, so now it's time to wrap this thing in some fresh paint. Then we're gonna do interior rims. I got a whole bunch of stuff for this channel, guys, so if you're building an OBS or a truck, I suggest you like and subscribe, guys, because I got a lot of good content coming up. And since it's a budget build, guys, the tools and material that I use are mid-grade, and you can get them from Harbor Freight and Home Depot. I'm not sponsored by them, but I just know how to use their tools, and there's some tips and tricks that you need to know in order to use these lower quality tools. I think they're all good. You just got to know how to use them, but I'm going to be going over all the tips and tricks you need in order to get a quality paint job. It's not going to be a $400 paint job. It's not going to be a $15,000 paint job. We're going to call it a $6,000 paint job, right there in the middle, but you're going to enjoy washing it, you're gonna enjoy taking it to the shows, and you're gonna break neck. Trust me, I broke necks in that red OBS that I painted. Yeah, I did that in my backyard. So we got a lot to cover, guys. This is going to be a two-part series. This first part, I'm going to show you how I get it through the primer stage, and then the next part is going to be the base coat and clear coat stage. So today, let's go over all the tools that I use in order to get this to the primer stage, guys. All right, guys, so make sure you take a screenshot here. As you can see, we've got most of our tools from Harbor Freight, some from Home Depot, Amazon, and an official paint store. So let's go over each and every one, how much they cost and what they're used for. First up is my Amazon Prime gun, 1.8 tip. Don't go expensive on this because they're really hard to clean and they tend to mess up easily, guys. Then we got a Harbor Freight dent puller, 80 bucks. This is good for small to medium dents. Next up, we got the Harbor Freight hammer and dolly set. Go cheap on this, guys. You don't need an expensive set. 17-inch inline sander from Harbor Freight, 8 bucks. You can do about 80% of the truck. And for the other 20%, I recommend you get a block set from Durablock. This one's around 80 bucks and it comes with various different blocks. And you're gonna need these different shapes and sizes in order to complete the entire truck, guys. So I recommend this beginner set because it has everything that you need. Next up, we got our 6-inch DA sander from Home Depot. This is a Husky brand. I think it's around 100 bucks. This is all you need, guys. And you can see I have a sponge in between. I'll explain how to use that later on in the video. And the most important item, guys, is safety. You want to protect your lungs and your eyes. And when it comes to protecting your lungs, they have different filters. This one's for grinding and sanding. And then we've got one for painting. You can see I still got a little bit of red from the red OBS. All right, guys, now that you got your supplies, let's start digging into this paint. And for the sake of this video, guys, we're only gonna focus on the hood, and you can use the same technique on the rest of the truck, guys. So the first thing that I did, guys, is sand the hood all the way down the middle using the DA sander and ceramic paper from Harbor Freight. So we're only gonna sand the hood and roof of this truck down the middle, and let me explain why, guys. All right, guys, when it comes to my paint jobs, there's two primers that I use, epoxy primer and 2K high build primer. When it comes to epoxy primer, guys, a couple pros are that it's corrosive resistant and it sticks very well to bare metal, and it's a non-porous material. One downside of epoxy primer is that it's a non-sandable paint. So you want to use epoxy primer when you have a big surface of bare metal. And one thing you need to understand, guys, is that only special paints stick to bare metal. And in the automotive world, that paint is epoxy primer. Another reason you would use epoxy primer is when you have rust. Even though we sand off all the surface rust, if you take a microscope and look at the metal, you're gonna see microscopic rust within the metal. And that's where the slight corrosion resistance comes into play with the epoxy primer. And last but not least, guys, epoxy primer is a non-porous material. That means chemicals and water can't penetrate through this layer of paint and ruin the metal underneath and ruin your paint job in the end, guys. Now we get to the 2K high build primer, guys. And a couple pros of this are that it's easy to sand and you can buy it in a DTM version, which means direct to metal. 2K high build primer is like a lighter version of body filler. So if you have any body work done on the vehicle, you're gonna want to finish it off with high build primer. That way you get an extreme extremely flat surface. And let's say you do your body work and some little pieces of metal are shining through. That's where the DTM version of 2K primer comes into play. Now, if we have an extremely big layer of metal, obviously we're gonna switch to our epoxy, but this is really where DTM is meant to be used, guys. Not a big surface of metal, just slight burn throughs. And like I said before, guys, the main advantage of 2K high build primer is that it's very easy to sand, and that's why we use our 2K over any epoxy primer that I shoot, guys. So for our situation, we're only sanding the hood and roof all the way down to metal and putting epoxy primer on those two panels, guys. The rest of the truck is pretty much rust free, so it doesn't require that extra step of epoxy primer. So this is how the hood looks after hitting it with that 80 grit ceramic sandpaper from Harbor Freight. I still got some rust spots remaining, but we're gonna go ahead and make sure that all that is taken care of. And then we're gonna hit it with our Advantage wax and grease remover. And when you're wiping the panel down, you don't want to go in circles, guys, because when you go in circles, you're just mixing the stuff together. You want to go from left to right. That way you make sure that you're lifting all that wax off the truck and not just spreading it around. Nascent full epoxy is what I'm using. Works great. You can get it online. It's not too expensive. And you can see I'm doing a 50% overlap over the entire hood. When you don't have a body shop, you want to get your panel to this point as soon as possible, guys. And that's why, even though I wasn't finished with all the body work, I still epoxied over the entire panel because I knew I couldn't work on it for the next couple of days. And I wanted to protect all the work that I had done up until that point. But it's finally Saturday, guys, so let's fix the remaining dents on the hood. I'm using guide code to help illustrate where the dents at, guys. All right, guys, there's our dent. I use the guide code to help us locate where it's at. So now all we got to do is get it down to bare metal. Here we go. And now we can wipe it with some wax and grease remover. And now we're ready to use our dent puller. Now that we got our stud in there, we're going to take our custom made dent puller. Look at those welds, guys. Sheesh. Hire me, bro. And we're going to be pulling up while we top down the high spots with the hammer. And that's the real objective here, guys. Yes, we're going to be pulling out the dent a little bit, but the real objective is to knock down the high spots surrounding the dent, because you can't sand through those, right? The sandpaper is not going to cut through metal, so you want to make sure that those high spots are low. Let's really take a look at those welds. Sheesh. Horrible. All right, that's pretty flat, guys. It's really hard to show you on camera, and the best thing I can tell you, man, is just go out there and practice on your own car, practice on family's cars, and eventually you'll start to figure out, okay, this is ready for body filler. These are the body fillers that I'm using, guys. We're going to be using 3M. This is about $100 a can, guys. It's very expensive. It works great. But if you don't want to spend that much money, you can do Roberlo. This is $40 a can. I've never had an issue with Roberlo. 3M is just a little easier to sand. So, you know, to each his own, guys. Y'all make the decision there. I'm using a spatula and a cardboard box today, guys. Make sure you knead your hardener a little bit before you use it. And you're supposed to have a scale when you're measuring this, guys. But if you don't have one like I do, if you just draw a line across, that's a really good way to measure body filler. And when you're mixing it, guys, the only thing you need to remember is to make sure that you scoop and spread. This is going to prevent air bubbles in the final product. I've already wiped this down with wax and grease remover, and trust me guys, you're gonna get a lot better with this. You're gonna make a mess at first, but all it takes is practice. Take a little bit and just spread it out. And you can see I'm going around. You really want to feather out these edges, that way it's easier for you to sand. Now, everybody hates doing body work, and that's because they're not babysitting their Bondo. Let me explain, guys. This is an auto body file. It's specifically designed for body filler. And shout out to Lakeside Auto Body for showing me this trick, man. It helps out a ton. So while your Bondo is drying, right before it becomes extremely hard, you want to take this and flatten it out as much as you can. That way you don't waste a ton of sandpaper and a ton of time fighting this thing. So let me show you how it's done. And what we're doing is we're removing the bulk part of the filler and only leaving what we really need to sand. But trust me guys, practice with this and I promise you it's going to save you a ton of time and money. Then you're going to take your 180 grit sandpaper and sand it until it's completely flat, guys. And this is what we're left with, guys. You can see we've got a small burn through, but like I said earlier, that's why we're using DTM primer, guys, because it's perfect for those small spots like that. So this is a high build primer that I'm using, guys. It's from Roberto. It's their 2K primer, 4:1 DTM. This is a hardener that comes with it. We're gonna shoot about 3, maybe 4 heavy coats of primer on this, guys. So let's get to it. All right, guys, that was 4 heavy coats, and now the hood is all prepped up and ready for the next steps. Like I said, guys, only the hood and roof are getting this entire technique done with the epoxy primer. The rest of the truck has a good foundation for us to work with, so we're only going to do the body work and sand it with 240 grit sandpaper. Now, one of the most asked questions that I get is, how do I know what sandpaper to use? And let me show you how I figured that out, guys. All right, guys, here we are in the setup, so don't mind the mess, but let's figure out what sandpaper we need to use for the Roberto 2K high build primer. So to find the TDS, all you have to do is type in the product name, and right after it, type in TDS for technical data sheet. So we're gonna go over here and we're gonna type in Roberto 2K high build primer technical data sheet. And then this is the one I use. You click on it. Accept all cookies. I love cookies. Then you see right here, guys, technical data sheet. Click on that. All right, then we scroll down and then we go to surface preparation, and you can see here 240 grit for OEM paint, right? So the rest of the vehicle has OEM paint. So you see a check mark right there. That means we're gonna use 240 grit sandpaper on a DA sander, guys. And that's why it's kind of hard to answer your questions about what sandpaper to use. Once you figure out the products that you're going to use, it's really easy, guys. So I would say first figure out the brand that you're going to go with, and from there you can figure out the supplies that you're going to need. Hope that helps, guys. Let's get back to preparing the roof of this truck for primer. All right, guys, same process as the hood. We're gonna sand this all the way down the middle. Thank God it's only surface rust, but yeah, we're gonna use some Dawn dish soap to wipe this off first, and then we're gonna get to sanding, guys. Let's get it. After wiping it down with our waxy grease remover, that's 1 layer of epoxy primer and then 4 layers of high build primer, guys. And if you don't let the epoxy primer dry overnight, you can spray the 2K high build primer right after you spray the epoxy. When it comes to sanding the bed, guys, you really want to be careful and make sure that you have that soft pad in between the paper and the disc, because you don't want to be cutting into this fiberglass bed, guys. So just take it easy. I know I'm going kind of quick here because the sun was going down, but really you just want to sand this down and don't put too much pressure on one side. Just keep it nice and even, and then we're ready for our 4 coats of 2K high build primer, guys. Like I said, we're not shooting epoxy on this because it's fiberglass. It doesn't have any rust. And so all it needs is 4 heavy coats of 2K high build primer, guys.